Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's your host, Brian Forbes, and this is the Black Factor, where I got the news that you can use, and perspective is everything. So I hope y'all are ready, because today, of course, needless to say, is the first day of Black History Month. And we're going to talk about Black History Month and why. Because I'm starting to wonder, is it an outdated concept? Or should it be? We're going to see. All right. I hope y'all ready for that. And I got to talk about this other situation with the 9-year-old who the police saw fit to pepper spray. While in handcuffs, by the way. A 9-year-old. All right. Sit tight. Let's get it. All right. So, before I get started, let me make a couple of quick announcements. First of all, y'all, don't forget, you can always join my live streams on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Periscope, Instagram. Did I say YouTube? And YouTube. Don't forget to join, follow, share the live. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit your notification button so you can make sure that every time we come on, you are ready and on deck for the show, because we're going to get it in, y'all. Don't forget we got our podcast now. It's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, YouTube, Google Podcast, and Radio Public. And we're going to add 3 more this week. Don't forget on Wednesday, we simulcast Oh So Smooth Radio. You can download that app on your Apple Store or on Google Play. Get that podcast, that download. That is a fantastic channel, by the way, and we are happy to now be a new part of that. We did our first show with them on last Wednesday, and we'll be doing the next show on this Wednesday, of course, at 7 o'clock at our regular time, and we're going to get it in, y'all. Don't forget to download the app. So, this being the first day of Black History Month, let me start out with Rick James, born in 1948. We all know the history of Rick James. No need to go further. Garrett Morris. How many of y'all know who Garrett Morris is? That's the guy who played Saturday Night Live all those years and played in multiple movies. Great actor. Probably one of the more underrated actors, I think, historically speaking, because he's played some pretty serious parts as well as some real comedic, had some real comedic roles, which I thought were fantastic. Also, my favorite, the leader of the Harlem Renaissance, ladies and gentlemen, born in 1902, considered one of the top 100 greatest black folks in American history, and that would be Mr. Langston Hughes, man after my own heart. Considering I consider myself to be somewhat of a Renaissance man. You gotta have skills. You gotta be, you gotta be about that, that life. You gotta have them art things going on. You know what I'm talking about? You gotta do things. I like doing things. Y'all know that though. Those of you who know me know. The rest of you will get to know as time moves on. Let me also add a very notable accomplishment that came across today. It appears that Miss Stacey Abrams, the former gubernatorial candidate for Georgia, now super activist, has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah, that's big. That's huge. It has been said by those around the globe that she is akin to Dr. King and the work that he did in regard to justice, equality, and for civil rights. And so she is being recognized on a global scale for her accomplishments in the state of Georgia. Stacey Abrams, you the bomb, girl. You the bomb. And she is now up for the Nobel Peace Prize. And the nomination within itself is huge. Let's hope she gets it. But props to Stacey Abrams for turning the Georgia blue. God dog it. What you gonna do about that right there? Later last week, y'all, I talked about, I had a little conversation where we talked about best possible places for black people to relocate within the United States. Well, in recent days, I've seen so many strange things happen. I'm starting to wonder if it's a better idea if you relocate out of the country. Well, in the next few days, I am going to actually put together a show, and we're going to talk about foreign places. Not so much that I'm ready to jump up and run, but at some point we have to be realistic about what's taking place in this country. And then you have to look at history, which, of course, I'm going to bring you that part about where we are versus where we've been and the potential to where we're going to end up. Y'all know that's right up my alley. So we got a lot of strange stuff going on in this country right now, y'all, just in case you didn't know. Now, I want to get to this other story. This is very disturbing to me. Apparently, the Rochester, New York, some police officers, and as best that I could count, I'm going to actually show you the video, but as best that I could count, there literally were about 6 or 7 police officers, multiple squad cars on the scene. Now, I want you to remember, we're talking about a 9-year-old. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start out by showing you the video, and then from there, we're going to discuss it.
Here, just stop for a second.
I want my dad!
Stand up.
47, I'm in
I want my dad! No!
Stop. Don't kick us, dear.
Stop! Oh my God!
Stop, dude.
Okay,
Just relax.
okay.
You
Wait, my
done?
mom, she's pregnant
Are you
now.
done?
My mom
Are you
pregnant. Oh, yes, please just
Stop.
let me go. I want my dad!
Stop, dear. Dear, just stop for a second and take a deep breath. Hey, just stop.
Please. I will get your dad. No, you said that you were gonna pepper spray me. No, please, no, stop. Sit back. Oh, I got a bad one.
Just spray her.
No, I have
Just
a
spray
bad
her at this
arm.
point.
Stop.
Dear,
Stop.
I got her. I got her.
Please wipe my eye. Wipe my eye, please.
Unbelievable.
I want my dad. I want my dad. I
Let's
want
move
my
this side
dad.
here.
I want my dad.
Stop or you're gonna get yourself hurt.
Stop. He's hurting me. I want to. Oh my God.
Then get in the car.
Please help somebody. No.
All right. So that was very disturbing. Now, my initial thoughts about this. It's bad enough that we already have to suffer in this country as black people under police brutality. And I'm going to actually re-air the show that I did some time ago that we did here where we talked about the police and their origins and why the behavior hasn't changed since the time of slavery. That's a whole issue right there. Now, the thing about this situation and I'm going to break the whole thing down for you, but I want one thing to be noted. Throughout this ordeal, that girl was in handcuffs the whole time. Now we're talking about a 9-year-old. We have to think about the mental state as well as how you would physically restrain a 9-year-old. Now, I also want to point out that on last show, we talked about discipline in our households versus the authority having been removed from the household in terms of corporal punishment type discipline versus verbal or command type discipline. Now, I don't know a whole lot of children growing up who just did as they were told. And I'm from the old school where my parents and grandparents used the belt. I mean, let's keep it 100. That's what it was. And I don't believe that I turned out so terribly behind that. Now, I had somebody point something out to me one time where we were having a discussion similar to this. And they said to me, do you have to give spankings, or do you let a child outsmart you? Well, it gave me something to think about. However, here's the rub. As our children progress and get older and become citizens of this country and of the world, we have to take into account that when discipline is removed from the home, then what happens when they go out into public? And we all know the old cliche, education starts at home. So we know that the police will not be considered abusive when they put their hands on our children because they've disallowed the parents from doing so. So what does that say about where we're headed in society? Our children, particularly between the ages of 0 and 10, these are the formative years. These are the years where they're going to get some of their most important lessons. Now, it was said that this young lady apparently was suicidal, and they were worried about her hurting herself or someone else. Well, after this incident, I wonder how she's feeling about hurting herself now. Now, my question is, there were 6 to 7 adults, police officers, who've been trained in methods of restraint, who've been trained in ways of doing their job. Am I to believe that every single incident where a person who is maybe combative or potentially mentally incapable of making rational thoughts are to be detained by excessive force? Where is the mental health professionals that should be in place in our police departments to respond to these sorts of incidents? Apparently, there was a phone call that came from the home that they needed assistance with her because of her current state. Now, no one, not even those police officers, knows what goes on or has gone on inside that household. And that's not to say that anything bad has. But there's one particular thing that stood out in my mind about that little girl, aside from the obvious. She kept saying, "My mother is pregnant." Now, I've been trying to figure out, after I watched this video multiple times, what will possess her to continue to go on about her mother being pregnant. Well, the only thing I can conclude would be that maybe that's part of the reason why she's acting out. She kept saying she wanted her father. So then that made me question, is the father in the home? Is the father an absentee type parent? Is he co-parenting? What's the situation? And if that be the case and the mother is pregnant, is the mother pregnant by her father or someone else? Is there some level of dysfunction that's taking place that's affecting this child in ways that no one is addressing? That becomes the question. And in that case, how does this child get to a place where at 9 years old, she's handcuffed to begin with, and then pepper sprayed as though she is a hardened criminal? There is no reasonable excuse. Even after having watched this video, there is no reasonable excuse for that many adult police officers to have to pepper spray a 9-year-old. It appeared to me that they became frustrated with the screaming and her resistance, and rather than just beat her, which they knew would come back to haunt them, they decided, just pepper spray her. That one officer said, at this point, just spray her. Like she's some sort of an animal. Now, I have a problem with that? That takes me down a whole different rabbit hole. And that being, and if you all my Black Factor family who are my regulars and who stick around for these different shows, you all remember me doing the show about the history of medical practice on black people, particularly black women, and the father, the so-called father of gynecology, who used black slaves as his guinea pigs and pincushions in order for him to find his way in the medical field. But in doing so, let's remember that the ideology that black women are somehow super strong, like some sort of cattle, and they can take things that white women can't. And white women's dainty persons were not to ever be offended. And in fact, today we still have to deal with the blonde-haired, blue-eyed spectacle that is supposed to be respected in a way where white women don't have to go through these sorts of slings and arrows. And so here we are watching a 9-year-old black child be handled like an animal because the all-white police individuals, because there was a female there as well, could not figure out anything else to do with her. See, I have a problem with this. There's no excuse, none. Handcuffed 9-year-old girl, and they pepper sprayed her because they could not figure out any other way to restrain her. Well, this all goes back to the failures in the system that we all live in. There was no use for this level. There was no excuse for this level of excessive force. You know, something has to be done in these cases. Now, what's crazy to me is that the police union are defending these officers and claiming that they did everything by the book. Well, if that was by the book, then they need to rewrite, or really need to throw that book away, and they need to rewrite a new one because that was trash. Now, the officers haven't been identified, of course, because they don't want the backlash that they know is coming to them. And they know that what they did was absolutely unnecessary and it's within itself childish. There's no defense for these officers. And this goes back to when I think about the entire 4 years that Donald Duck was in office, and they did everything in their power to help destroy unions. Yet no one has ever gone after the police union. Now, where's the problem here? This is the union who defends police officers no matter what, even after they've murdered unarmed black people wholesale. Now, my question here becomes, maybe if this girl was a little bit older, maybe a little bit bigger, would they have shot her? Was the pepper spray the alternative to a child versus a bullet? See, this is no different. This situation is absolutely no different than if they had shot and killed her. The same level of frustration and aggravation by these police officers, exactly the same level of fear, frustration, and aggravation that these police officers use as an excuse for murdering unarmed black people, because their lives hold no value to these white officers in a black community, which goes back to why police reform is so necessary and why it has become necessary for people who are from those communities, who are familiar with those faces, who have similarities in those faces, be the ones to police their own communities. Because we can't trust someone else who thinks that we're animals to police us. The White House Capitol insurrection, the Capitol insurrection in Washington, D.C., they have a running count of military, retired military, and police officers, civil servants, who were literally at that Capitol and ran inside of there and are now catching charges like crazy, which is a good thing. But let's take into account all the ones who weren't there, who still feel the same way, who police our communities daily and were fully prepared to pepper spray a 9-year-old handcuffed little girl? Let's talk about the mental state of a child to begin with. And then let's talk about the mental state of a child who's going through something. And your answer, throw her in handcuffs like a criminal. Throw her in the back of a police squad car like a criminal. What do you think this child has seen that represents exactly how she's being treated before? Should she be afraid? Absolutely. And she's acting exactly the way a scared child would act in that situation. And then ultimately, you pepper spray her like a criminal. Yep, I got a problem with this, and this most definitely needs to be addressed. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what she did. That's not how you treat a 9-year-old little girl, period. If you got a handcuff and pepper spray a 9-year-old girl, that's what your training taught you. There's something seriously wrong with the training. Now, I'm going to tell you, the part that really bothers me is the lack of compassion and empathy. See, this is what we don't get. This is what the compassion and empathy is reserved for the Dylan Roofs of the world who get fed hamburgers on their way to jail as they've murdered a room full of people. See, that's compassion and empathy. This is what we refer to as white privilege. Today I saw a post of regarding this topic. And this person on here, the topic started off like this. The person said, I don't believe that there are any good cops. And someone else, of course, spoke up and said, well, that's not true. There are good cops. And needless to say, the retort to that was, that's not true, because if there were good cops, then the good cops would stop the bad cops from behaving the way that they do. But of course, we know that all of the good cops get fired for standing up to the bad cops. That's the way it's traditionally been done. So all the good cops are no longer cops. What does that tell you? This is where we are. And we continue to make excuses for these individuals who have no intent of doing the right thing. Why? Because they don't have to. Why should they? They don't have to. It's not for them to do. It doesn't matter. They do as they please. And we suffer the consequences of their pleasure. And it's unfair. It's ridiculous. This is where we are in America. Now, my point to what I'm saying is this. This guy on there says, well, I'm blue. And if you haven't been on a police force or for at least 25 years and done the job and this kind of thing, then you really can't speak about it. Now, he did condemn the actions of the officers, and that was his point. I've been on the police force long enough that I know that what they did was dead wrong. But here's where I took exception to his comment, because, I mean, don't get me, hey, I'm with you 100%. I'm glad somebody said it. However, just because you have the authority as an officer, let's remember one thing. You are not blue. Blue does not exist in the color scheme of God's creation. You are an officer by choice. You took an oath to do a job the way that it's supposed to be done, and by the law. Wearing a uniform and adopting certain ideas is a matter of choice. Period. Full stop, point blank. Miss me with the nonsense about you being blue. There are no blue people. Except the blues that we sing when the white cops get done jumping on our head. And again, that is what we call a little thing, white privilege. Y'all see that, the white privilege card. Trumps everything. Member since birth, good through death. Card holder name, scot-free. See what I'm saying? Now, people hate the idea. They talk about, when you start talking about defunding the police, they don't want to hear that. Oh, you just want the criminals to run wild. First of all, that's not what defund the police means to begin with. Secondly, you're more offended by that than you are this sort of brutality against a 9-year-old girl in handcuffs. It's kind of like the way white people will say things like, you're playing the race card. You want to get on me because I'm black and pointing out your atrocity, yet you refuse to say anything to your white brethren who managed to continue to manifest this evil. That's kind of like a woman who will go out and chase down another woman who's sleeping with her husband. Seems like to me you need to be getting with your husband. That woman ain't did nothing to you. But this is what we do. We deflect from those who are the real problem. It's kind of like the war on drugs. They went through the black neighborhood and scooped up everybody in the hood, but they never stopped the cats that was bringing it in. Because guess who was bringing it in? See, these are the hypocrisies that we're faced with every single day. Now, the young lady was released to her family, which I also find interesting. After all of that, I just want to know why it was so necessary to put her through all of that, only for her to be released. I think and what were they even taking her into custody for? Actually, I don't know the backstory behind it, but I know, as long as I know, she didn't kill nobody. So whatever it is, a 9-year-old couldn't possibly have done enough to warrant being treated like an animal and a criminal. Yep, I got a serious problem with that. And I'll continue to. According to the officers, she got that treatment because she disobeyed orders. I don't know any 9-year-old black girl that's going to obey the orders of a group of white people that's trying to harm her. I don't know. I guess they feel like, see, that's that superiority again. You do as we say. Do as we say. Or else. Now, let's talk about Black History Month and the history of Black History Month. Now, before I get into the details of that, I want to first say that while I enjoy the fact that this gives us an opportunity to shine, so to speak. No, I don't even want to use that word, because shining, when you say shine, that's a bad thing in black historical vernacular. So I don't want to use that word today. We have an opportunity to have our stories told in a more open forum, so to speak, where white ears are open for a short time to entertain our historical relevance in this country. Not that it matters, because it goes in one ear and out the other. But the question is, what does it really mean? Do we really need a Black History Month? Or should history itself be told the way that it actually is and what really happened? See, the problem is, until the lion learns to read and write, the story will always be told by the hunter. Because I'm sure there's a few lions that had their way out there, but you'll never get to hear about those because they can't read and write. Which means that history and the telling of the story and the spoils go to the winner. And so, of course, throughout our history in this country, so many things about our lives and our contributions to this country have been omitted. And you have people who literally are walking around every single day believing that black people have done nothing except ask for welfare and help and are lazy and all of the other stereotypical nonsense that has been propagated through media from the word go, since the time media and word of mouth was even available. See, you got to understand that if one isn't to believe that these things don't affect black life, is foolish, because that's like saying that these corporations who spend billions of dollars every year to study people for the purpose of advertising are wasting their money. We know that's a lie. We know that advertising and the constant telling of certain stories make things become the truth in the eyes of those who live in the bubble. And even we tend to fall into the category sometimes because we hear stuff enough times and we buy into it. For example, black on black crime. There is no such thing that is a white contrived idea to dehumanize and demoralize a group of people for committing whatever the same behaviors that they commit on a regular basis are, and make us the poster child for that. That's a propaganda campaign. Propaganda is all around us. Propaganda is what Twitler, Donald Duck, used in order to put black people and put this country in the tailspin that it's in. Propaganda. This is what's happening. So during Black History Month, I'm going to just tell y'all like this. I'm black 365 days a year. And the reason why the Black Factor exists is because we're going to discuss history and everything that goes with it every week, 3 times a week. We don't wait until February 1st to start talking about us. That's why we have the Black Factor. And there are others out here just like that, thankfully. One of my YouTube users, Trollphobic, says, not too many days ago, I just seen an officer slam a brown-skinned teenager on her head in Florida, knocking her out. What's the limit? Absolutely. The Other Way says, share the book, Police Stops Notebook. It's on Amazon. It has specific questions a person can use during and after police stops. I always recommend stuff like that. That's a good thing. So the question that gets raised here is Black History Month. While it is a good thing, it's a double-edged sword for me. Because as long as we continue to acknowledge that we need a month or time to recognize, as though history itself for black people can be fit into 28 days, shortest month of the year. I mean, let's keep it 100. What we do, what we have done, and our contributions to this country, baby, you can't put that in 30 days, 28 days. If black folks had, if you hear these clowns that tell black people, get over slavery, get over this, get over that. If tomorrow we had the ability to pack up and leave these United States with all of the contributions that we have made, this will be a third world country, period. Don't get it twisted. Without black labor and white wealth, because that's what it gained, white wealth. Without black labor, you don't have the cotton industry, which built this country. Cotton, tobacco, sugar cane, indigo. Don't get it twisted. You don't have the wealth. You don't have the Civil War. You don't have this so-called democracy that we have today. You don't have simple things like the stoplight. You don't have the golf tee. You don't have refrigeration. I could go on all day. You don't have GPS. I could go on all day. I can do this all day. I can name so much stuff that without you don't have a light bulb. Now, I know you believe that Thomas Edison, oh, he invented the light bulb. You better check your history and know who made it possible. If we got up tomorrow and left here and took everything that we contributed to this country with us, third world, if that. Don't get confused now. And like I always say, I'm going to say it again. You ain't got to believe me. Look it up. The history and inventions and creations and skills that black people brought to this continent, baby, look, y'all couldn't live without it. See, there was no problem with black folks. We wasn't lazy, and we wasn't doing all these other violent things that y'all claim we were when we was doing all this for free. See, the minute you start having to pay after we were no longer enslaved, that's when it became a problem. Yeah, imagine that. All of a sudden, it's a problem now because you got to pay us. Well, them bills is coming due because I'm still not against reparations. And there's going to come a time where one way or the other, black people in America will come to repair, like it or not. I want to think that all of the stories should be told. And let's not forget to include all of the omissions that don't include successes by black people. Let's consider all the omissions of the violence, the dehumanization, the degradation, and the destruction of black people and black life that's been committed by whites in America. All the Wilmingtons that have been destroyed, all of the Black Wall Streets that have been destroyed, all of the riots and murders and churches burned and homes burned and people told not to register people to vote and all other stuff that goes along with it and all the dead bodies and all of the blood that this earth would have to cough up. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the real history of America. Let's not just include the little small stuff that they put in the history books for the little white kids where they want to try and claim that black people in America were some sort of visitors, migrants. You know, they actually tried that. They have slaves listed as migrants. Really? I would like to believe that if we had the opportunity, I don't think we would have left the continent of Africa for those of us who were there and forcibly removed by greed and barbarianism of white folks. That's the history. So let me tell y'all like this. I got some good stuff here. We're going to talk about the history of Black history right quick. So, in case y'all didn't know this, the history of Black History Month begins in Chicago, of all places, my hometown. In the summer of 1915, Dennis McCullum said, by the time they pay us for reparations, the dollar bill will have no value and all value will be moved to Bitcoin. You're probably right. Well, at least on another note, I think the Harriet Tubman $20 bill will be coming out soon. I ain't mad at that. So the history of Black history begins in Chicago, y'all. And apparently, I didn't know this, Carter G. Woodson is an alumni of the University of Chicago. Many of his friends and himself, he traveled here from Washington, from D.C., to participate in the national celebration of the 50th anniversary of emancipation, sponsored by the state of Illinois. Dig that. Now, I'm wondering, did they do that from the state of Illinois because of Lincoln being from Illinois? I don't know. I don't know about that, but that would make sense. Thousands of African Americans traveled from across the country to see exhibits highlighting the progress of their people that their people had made since the destruction of slavery. Awarded a doctorate in Harvard 3 years earlier, Woodson joined with other exhibitors with a Black History display. Despite being held at the Coliseum, the site of the 1912 Republican Convention, an overflow crowd of 6,000 to 12,000 waited outside for their turn to view the exhibits. An overflow crowd of 6,000 to 12,000 waited outside just so they could see the exhibits of Black progress since the end of slavery. 50 years. That's amazing. I just wonder if somebody did that today, if we had a commemoration of the end of slavery and about the progress of Black people in America, and it was an exhibit, I wonder how many people would show up. Inspired by the 3-week celebration, Woodson decided to form an organization to promote the scientific study of Black life and history before leaving town. On September 9th, Woodson met at the Wabash YMCA with A.L. Jackson and 3 others and formed the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and it is affectionately known as the ASNLH. That's interesting. So this was the beginning of what became Black History Month. He hoped that others would popularize the findings that he and other Black intellectuals would publish in the Journal of Negro History, which he established in 1916. As early as 1920, Woodson urged Black civic organizations to promote the achievements that researchers were uncovering. He is a graduate member of Omega Psi Phi, and he urged his fraternity brothers to take up the work. In 1924, with the creation of Negro History and Literature Week, which they renamed Negro Achievement Week. Very interesting. It began as a week, Negro Achievement Week. That's interesting. Now, so in 1925, he decided that the association had to shoulder the responsibility of making a greater impact nationally. Going forward, it would both create and popularize knowledge about the Black past. He sent out press release announcing Negro History Week in February of 1926. Woodson chose February for reasons of tradition and reform. It is commonly said that Woodson selected February to encompass the birthdays of 2 great Americans who played a prominent role in shaping Black history, namely Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, whose both birthdays are the 12th and the 14th, respectively. Most importantly, he chose them for reasons of tradition. Since Lincoln's assassination in 1865, the Black community, along with other Republicans, had been celebrating the fallen president's birthday. And since the late 1890s, Black communities across the country have been celebrating Douglass. Well aware of the pre-existing celebrations, Woodson built Negro History Week around traditional days of commemorating the Black past. Now, you know, I got to thinking about that, and you know, this is one of those things where, again, it saddens me. I'm glad, like, for example, the crowd that was at the exhibition for Blacks to celebrate the Emancipation 50-year anniversary. I guess it bothers me that we have to work so hard in order for us to recognize us. Yet we are dead set on others recognizing us. It's kind of like if you don't love yourself, you can't expect anybody else to love you either. You have to quit buying into the propaganda and the nonsense. He envisioned the study and celebration of the Negro as a race, not simply as producers of great man, and Lincoln, however great, had not freed the slaves. The Union Army, including hundreds of thousands of Black soldiers and sailors, had done that. Rather than focusing on two men, the black community, he believes, should focus on the countless black men and women who had contributed to the advance of human civilization, which goes directly back to what I just said. Without whom, so many things would not be possible or even available to us, to everyone else for that matter. Let's remember, who put a man on the moon? The math of a black woman. Let's not get confused, y'all. The 1920s was the decade of the new Negro, a name given to the post-war World War I generation because of its rising radical pride and consciousness. Urbanization and industrialization had brought over 1 million African Americans from the rural South to the big cities of the nation. Now, y'all remember we talked about the migration and the reverse migration a couple of weeks ago. The expanding black middle class became participants in the consumers of black literature and culture. Black history clubs sprang up, teachers demand materials to instruct their pupils, and progressive whites stepped and endorsed the efforts. Now, this is where this is about to get interesting, okay? Because there's something here that I find, yet again, disturbing. Now, y'all know I always talk about how we get co-opted and how the things that we do, the culture vultures always manage to jump on that bandwagon. Because there are so many things that we have set the pace for in this world globally that it's in fact amazing. And I'm talking about just now, even with the music and all of the fashion and all the different things that people gravitate toward around the world that were created in the hood across this country. So Woodson and the association scrambled to meet the demand. They set a theme for annual celebration and provided study materials, pictures, lessons for teachers, plays for historical performances, and posters of important dates and people. Provisioned with a steady flow of knowledge, high schools and progressive communities formed Negro history clubs to serve the desire of history buffs to participate in the re-education of black folks and the nation. Now, this thing stretched out from coast to coast. In 1937, at the urging of Mary McLeod Bethune, Woodson established the Negro History Bulletin, which focused on the annual theme. As Negroes' population grew, mayors issued Negro History Week proclamations, and the cities like Syracuse, progressive whites joined Negro History Week with National Brotherhood Week. Now, here's what I want to talk about. I want to back up. Isn't it interesting how the need for this level of education was put into the schools by those who were interested, and there was obviously a large interest. So in other words, this became a part of the school curriculum. So in other words, Black history was beginning to be taught, and the information was being put where it needed to go. Now let's fast forward to George Bush or one of these other, I'm not sure who began with the whole education curriculum situation where it became local or national, where they only allowed the teachers to teach certain things. Where right now today, our students, if a teacher decided they wanted to teach Black history in their classroom, they would be heavily reprimanded, if not terminated. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about where we are in this country and the information that we gain, what we are to get and not to get? Thank you, Dennis, calling me a zombie. I see you. He said my glasses make me look like a zombie. Hey, believe me, bro, if I could see, I wouldn't have them on. I think that we are in a right now in particular, we're in a real interesting spot because the world is watching and the world is listening. But I have to admit this, and I'm going to do it publicly. The problem that I have with my people is that we want an awful lot. The only problem is that our agendas are often very confused, muddled, and mixed up. We want so much. We deserve so much. Although, let's keep in mind, we are not monolithic. I have a problem when we come up with a movement or we come up with an idea. Let's take Black Lives Matter, for example. Why is it necessary for us to either be with Black Lives Matter or against Black Lives Matter? That's the way our community operates, which is very unnecessary. Why is this unnecessary? It's unnecessary because we don't have to be one or the other. We can be both. We can have the idea of Black Lives Matter, and we can put together reparations from another organization. We could put together community policing. Well, that's part of Black Lives Matter, but dealing with mental health in the Black community. These things don't have to intersect. They can all be their own entity and be in support of one another. You don't have to be against something just because you may not agree with their platform. But the fact is, we cannot sit here and pretend that we don't need these platforms. These platforms are a necessity. They're necessary. We don't have to bash the other to make ourselves better. You don't have to condemn a glass of dirty water, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad once said. All you have to do is set a clean glass down next to it. We don't have to fight one another. And until we get our agendas in order, we can't complain about what the LBGT community gets. And I hate to make the comparison between Black people and LBGTQ community. However, it seems that Black people manage to complain quite a bit when they get what they want. The thing is, regardless of whether they agree or disagree, they stick together and they get one thing done and they move on to the next one. Like many other communities around this country, you first have to know what it is that you're looking for before anybody is going to get it for you, give it to you. And it's not even a matter of it being given to you. If you want something, you have to demand it. Power concedes nothing without demand. And if we do not demand specifics, they'll give you whatever and say, we gave you that. I heard a congressperson make the ignorant statement that Black people receive reparations with the election of Barack Obama. These are the sorts of ridiculous buffoons that we have to push back against. Carter G. Woodson pressed for schools to use Negro History Week to demonstrate what students learned all year. In the same vein, he established a Black Studies Extension program to reach adults throughout the year. It was in the sense that Blacks would learn of their past on a daily basis that he looked forward to the time when an annual celebration would no longer be necessary. See? Let me address one thing at a time here because it's a lot in here. He had the idea by starting Black History Week that there would no longer be a necessity for it to be any week or month, but in fact that it would be a daily undertaking that we understood our history and that we were taught our history even within the school systems in the curriculum. Why? Because again, without Black people, you don't have America. Without the contributions of Black people, you don't have America. You just don't. Don't believe me? Look it up. But see, this makes me wonder. He wanted it so that there would not be a necessity for an annual celebration. Because by now, in 2021, it should be clearly understood the contributions that black people make. But you know what's funny as hell to me is when you tell black people about things that other black people did and they go, wow, I never knew that. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't even be a conversation. It should be that these are obvious because these things have to be discussed to make clear why certain things happen. Cause and effect is all around us. And because of slavery, the institution of servitude, forced servitude, many things came to pass. These things should be recognized every single day. Again, why we have the Black Factor. Because this is what I do. I'm going to point these things out every chance I get, and trust and believe I'm learning every day. And every day that I learn something new, I'm going to bring it to you. But the funny thing is, look at how many times we have to learn this stuff that we should have been taught all along. What's the purpose of trying to keep a people from knowing who they are? That speaks volumes. The fact that many of us don't even know our own true heritage because of being stolen from a foreign land and placed onto a foreign continent among a brutal system of slavery, murderers, rapists. We're here. Now, I follow Carter G. Woodson's ideology in that I feel the same way, and I believe that he and Dr. King had very similar thought processes. I don't believe that Dr. King intended for us to be where we are. I don't believe that we should be where we are. And here's what I mean. Dr. King fought for equality, civil rights, for the rights, for justice, for the rights of black people. The problem is in gaining access equally to establishments and the ability to move freely and to vote. Somehow along the way, we dropped the ball. Instead of us integrating ourselves into society in a way that benefited us, we allowed that to also be co-opted and told what we can and cannot do. And although there are laws in place, you can never change the hearts of men. You can change laws, but you can't change the hearts of men. And in the process, we managed to lose what we had because we finally had access to what they had. And we thought that meant, well, we don't need this anymore. We got theirs. And that hurt us very badly. Our communities, people get mad, or should I say white folks get mad when they see signs that say buy black or black owned business, which I see a lot in Chicago. But don't get mad, because if we didn't have to be separated, if we were not separated by law to begin with, and now by attitude, there would be no need for us to work so hard to cling to one another, to support us. Because it ain't gonna work no other way. Otherwise, we're at the mercy of those who would see us in chains if they had the opportunity. We ain't going. We ain't going. So we need to get unstuck and begin building our communities again the way we used to. I want to buy a town, y'all. If I bought a town, would y'all come move in? Would y'all move into my town? We can set it up. It'll be real fly. We'll have nightlife. We'll have everything. We'll have a car dealership. We'll have all the good stuff. Good restaurants. Great communities. Well, in the schools, off the chain. We'll have our own independent school district. And we would teach our children what they need to know. Not only what they should know, but what they need to know. Let's buy a town, y'all. Let's buy a whole town and build it up and create the next Black Wall Street. But we got to be collective. Remember the other day we talked about collective economics. In the South, black teachers often taught Negro history as a supplement to United States history. See, why should that be a supplement? Why shouldn't it be history? There should be no black history, white history. There should only be history, period. And include the individuals who got their hands dirty. Let's talk about the Crispus Attucks of the world. First person to die in the American Revolution, black man. They ain't gonna mention that guy unless you ask them. See? In fact, there was a benefactor of some of this education who would hide Carter G. Woodson's textbook beneath the desk to avoid drawing the wrath of the principal. During the civil rights movement in the South, the Freedom Schools incorporated black history into the curriculum to advance social change. The Negro history movement was an intellectual insurgency that was part of every larger effort to transform race relations. We know they don't want race relations changed. They prove that to us every day. Look what's going on right now. See, this goes back to why I'm going to do the show about the potential of actually moving outside of these United States. There's some other stuff brewing, y'all. Y'all remember, I said this other thing was going to happen. I like it when I'm wrong. I like it when I make these crazy predictions and I'm wrong. I wasn't wrong that time. And I hope I'm wrong the next time because I have some other stuff that I'm going to bring forward that I don't think is very good. In the 1960s, there was a dramatic effect on the study of the celebration of Black history. Before the decade was over, Negro History Week would be well on its way to becoming Black History Month. The shift to a month-long celebration began even before Dr. Woodson's death. As early as the 1940s, blacks in West Virginia, a state where Woodson often spoke, began to celebrate February as Negro History Month. In Chicago, a now forgotten cultural activist, Frederick H. Hammurabi, started celebrating Negro History Month in the mid-60s. Having taken an African name in the 1930s, Hammurabi used his cultural center, the House of Knowledge, to fuse African consciousness with the study of black past. By the late 1960s, the young blacks on college campuses became increasingly conscious of links with Africa. Black History Month replaced Negro History Week at a quickening pace. So I'm saying all of this, ladies and gentlemen, to say that we have to rise above what we've been taught. We have to raise our consciousness if we intend to maintain ourselves within this country as a force to be reckoned with. Our voices have to be heard. Our willingness to sacrifice must be felt. So, with that, all I'm going to say is each one teach one, and y'all make sure your babies are getting the proper education. Make sure that they know who they are and where they came from and why. If they won't teach it in the schools, education starts at home. Get them to understand, because the self-esteem of a people is critical to its survival. And if we don't teach our young people who they are, their ability, their power, then we lose a soldier. You know how many soldiers are being lost every day to violence and crime because they don't know who they are? Because they're not sure that they're going to live past 20. It's up to us to make sure that they know that they have a future, and that with or without the support of anyone else, we got their back. We got to have each other's back, y'all. So with all of that said, I'm going to make one more suggestion before I go. And that is that you go out and commit an act of black on black business. Go out, support your black businesses, not just for Black History Month, but every single day, every week, every year, so that we survive, thrive, and grow. It's what we got to do, y'all. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, you can catch us at Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Periscope, Instagram, and YouTube. Don't forget to hit the follow button. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to join. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit your notifications so you know when we're coming on. Don't forget your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, YouTube, Google Podcast, and Radio Public. And also Smooth Radio every Wednesday at our same time at 7 as a radio simulcast. And you can download that app on Play Store or Google, what is it, Apple Store, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with your boy while I rant and rave and go on about these things. But just know, although it is Black History Month, we're going to do Black History 365 days a year because this is the Black Factor. And it's about that time for me, y'all, to get on down and let y'all have it back. It's time for dinner. So I want everybody to have yourselves a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. I love y'all. Love, peace, and chicken grease.